Okay, so the most important videos I always save for the Sundays because there you have actually time to watch them, to maybe make some notes and come into the right mindset of reprogramming some of the beliefs that you might be having right now. So I want to talk about like what are the problems with learning German right now because of course many of you want to do that, but sometimes it is motivation, sometimes it is lack of structure. So I want to kind of like lay things out for you. First of all, like how much time does it take to learn German, right? So according to the FSI, which is the I think the Foreign Language Institute in US, they categorize the languages into five different categories, and they started the first one with German. So they said, sorry, with the French, Spanish, Romanian, and Dutch. And the funny thing that I saw with these categorization is that in category one, look, they say that 24 to 30 weeks or 600 to 750 class hours. And category two is German, but again, they say like it's like 30 weeks in a category of its own. All right, it's understandable. Like it's a little bit more difficult than Dutch and Romanian, but like it's not such a dramatic difference. So most of the things like with um, life is too short and learning German, things like that, all of that started like essentially back in the times when there were a lot of refugees coming from Germany and moving to US. And all of a sudden, like many of the people frowned upon this entire like group of population who is like speaking German to each other because, of course, these were the exact same people they were in war with. This is all the same kind of hatred that you see sometimes now with like Ukrainians when they are seeing like Russian speakers and they're like all of a sudden, yeah, like, what kind of nonsense? We don't want to like hear Russian, we don't want to speak Russian, things like that. This is almost like the same level of stuff that was happening back then. So what happened after that? Like what happened after that was like, yeah, all of this stories about like how difficult is it to learn German, how German is such an ugly language, things like that, like a complete like dehumanization of a language which happened in that time, where like it is the same language which has given you some of the greatest scientists, some of the greatest composers, some of the greatest like cultural things, your cars and stuff. So that was a very interesting idea because like it didn't really have to go into that direction. Like it's a little bit difficult, and I can tell you from experience because I've tried to take a look at the grammar structures of Romanian and Dutch, and Danish is also in the same category, but it is not mentioned here in the blog post. So these are like not very difficult languages, and German is a little bit more difficult than that. And what I'm attempting right now is Russian, which is a category 4 language, and it needs 1100 hours, so it like takes almost twice as many hours as the category 1 language. So I'll quickly show you like how I was like organizing the Russian languages, the Russian language learning so far. So the first thing I did was I wanted to have some stories. So my teacher sent me these storybooks, which was in Russian, and these are like very short stories, right? Like this was the same concept that we told you that we were doing with faster German stories, but we did something better there. What we did was we had the German text on one side, and right beside it we have the English text so that you don't have to go back and forth between Google Translate and so on, and you're able to read things with more ease, which was very important for us because like this, for example, if you take a look at this text, like to finish one of this text, it would take me around an hour minimum, and that is now because I already understand a lot more things. But if you'd be like giving me a text like this when I'm just like starting out, so right now my Russian progress has been like around 3 weeks, 3 solid weeks. I can tell you, and I'm like around 60% of the level of A1, and I understand many things in Russian. But of course, then you are able to make sentences, simple sentences. You're able to make sense of simple sentences. But when more complicated things start coming, just completely brain shuts off, and you're like, okay, like what am I doing with my life? But for me, like these stories really, really help because first of all, you're building everything in context. So that was the first thing that I started doing when I was like picking up a new language. Then afterwards, I kind of sorted out the literature by class. Just like in CBSE school, we used to have these NCRT books, Hindi 1, class 1, Hindi class 2, Hindi class 3, and so on. I thought like why not, like maybe Russians have the same thing. So of course Russian schools have the same thing. So they have these class 1, class 2, like really baby texts first of all, then afterwards like very tiny poems. And that kind of eases you into the language so much more because what you have to keep in mind is for you to be able to keep progressing further, you have to give yourself like little boosts of motivation all the time. Like if you try something and if you're constantly failing in that, like no doubt that you're not going to have the motivation of like coming back to it ever again. So it's very important that you like decide your levels in a way that first of all you're also having the confidence, oh okay, that's not a problem at all, I can read this, I can do this, it's understandable, it's not so complicated and so on. And that was the main idea why we launched the Faster German Stories too, because for German, like this kind of material is not really available, which is fun, which is easy to comprehend. So we were like, all right, we're going to change things along with providing courses. We are also going to provide you the study material or so the side things which you're able to use, right? So that's what I did. That was like massively helpful. And so any kind of language you start learning, you have to come up with a structure for that. If you don't have a structure for that, it is going to get a lot more difficult for you to understand like how to approach that language. And I'm going to talk about the structure later in this video. So I'm right here at category 4 language. So I'm like really, I know what I'm talking about right now because I've learned German. I'm fluent in that. I know the grammar and stuff for like Romanian Dutch. So I understand that. And what is the S3 and R3 level? So if you take a look at the next slide, the S3 and R3 levels, which is in the ILR, it corresponds to the C1 level. That means if you're having 750 class hours or 30 weeks, if you divide that, you will get 25 class hours, right? Like you divide 750 by 30, so 25 hours of class hours. So it's not even 25 hours of class hours. You just say 25 class hours, which comes out to like 45 minutes per class hour. Like that's how it is calculated. So for some simplification, I think it comes at around like 18 point something. So I put it at 20 hours. So let's say in 1 week, you need 20 hours of learning, right? So according to this, you come up with like around 7 months. In 7 months, you would be completely fluent with C1 level native level proficiency, which is like close to native proficiency. Like from there, it's just a matter of like reading. It's just a matter of like listening to get to the C2 level. Because that's why you will also see there are no courses available for C2 level. It just doesn't exist. C2 level is something that you have to do on your own by practicing, by speaking, by reading, by writing. Like there's no courses that you'd find for C2. And if you'd find, like it's like very, very specialized and only in a few places. It's not a common thing. Most of the textbooks, they stop at C1 level. Most of the courses, they stop at C1 level because there's not much more that you can teach after the C1 level. Like after that, it's just like your own motivation, your own desire to read more things, right? So 7 months. But this is with 20 hours. Now, what if I tell you that I'm simply going to like maybe multiply this by 1.5. So that means like I say I'm going to not do 30 hours, but I'm going to do 20 hours. I will do 30 hours. What do I do now? I divide 7 by 1.5 on the other hand. So that brings me to around like 4.6 months or 5 months, right? So this is also doable. Now, how do you break down the 30 hours, right? So let's say during the week, even if you're working and stuff, like at least you're able to take out like 2 hours per day. Like there's like nobody who cannot tell me that they cannot take out 2 hours per day during the weekdays. So 2 hours per day during the weekdays. So you're having five days for that. So like 10 hours you're covering here. And then afterwards on the weekends, if you have absolutely no life and you want to say, all right, I'm going to just focus on learning German. So you have 10 hours on both days. You can organize it like that. Saturday, Sunday, 10 hours each. So 5 hours, either 5 hours sitting or 3 hours sitting 3 times, right? If you don't want to do that either, what you can do is like different. 3 hours, that means like 90 minutes in the morning, 90 minutes in the evening. That brings you to around like 15 hours. And then afterwards, like you change it further. So like 15 hours, the rest of the time can be divided like 7 hours sitting plus 8 hours. That's your normal work timing. So it's not going to be that complicated. So, and like what I really like to do is essentially like 4 hours during the weekdays. So you have 20 hours and then afterwards you can divide on the weekend a little bit like easier, which is like 5 hours each. 5 hours each is a lot more doable, right? So it is still doable. Like you just have to see all of these things at the amount of time invested in things and the kind of level of familiarity you get with the language, because that's exactly what we're aiming for, right? Every single day you will sleep, and after you have like burnt your brain with like going through some German text and so on, you'll be like, all right, tomorrow morning I wake up, I just feel a lot more comfortable with the language. This is what is constantly happening with me every single day with Russian. It's been 3 weeks now, and now in the 3rd week I just feel so much more comfortable. For example, like going through all of these texts that I was showing you. If I would be like reading some kind of stories, I'd be going through them, I'd be like, okay, like, you know, this is very interesting. So for example, look at this story. Like this has the German and English translation, but again, like it has the German and English translation in a way that it kind of breaks the flow. And when you're having them side by side, I just personally find it is a lot more interesting. So these kind of like stories, of course, like really, really help in getting through to the language. Then afterwards, we have the second thing, which is, of course, levels we talked about. The second thing is like why most people never end up learning German, right? So I don't want you to just like, buy any kind of courses or buy any kind of books. Like it's pointless if you never really get to it. So the most important thing is that when you buy something, you essentially force yourself that you have spent your money here, you're going to sit down and you're going to focus on this thing. Why, like most people like think, all right, like German is so difficult, things like that is a lot more from the movies, a lot more from the series, a lot more from social media and stuff where people themselves don't speak German and they're like, oh yeah, German is so difficult to speak. I'm like, yeah, if you have never really tried to learn a specific language, of course it is going to be difficult for you. If I touch something and I say, all right, like, I cannot handle this, or like it's just too difficult for me without actually like putting all the efforts inside, of course you're going to cry about it. But we know, like in the Indian education system, at least we have gone through much more difficult things than like a language like German. Like we have been through a lot more difficult things. Like our math exams, our physics exams, chemistry exams, our university entrance examination, and so on. Like this thing is not really a big deal for us at all. And I'm like very, very honest about it. Like German is not a difficult language if you have cleared your 12th grade with 70% marks or something. You'd be just fine learning this. So social programming, right? Like this is the biggest thing with like German and like the kind of reputation it has around it. That German is difficult, German is ugly, just it will take too much time to be fluent. What's the point of learning German and so on? Like, of course, there's a point in learning German because if you want to move to Germany, like you also have access to countries like Switzerland and Austria, because all of these are the countries which speak German. Even in Denmark, like the southern parts of Denmark, they speak perfect German. Most of the Scandinavian countries are able to understand German because the lexical similarity is very, very close. So the written parts are very similar in German and the Scandinavian languages. About the story with like just go to Canada, US, and Australia. I mean, you can try that, but then you can also kind of compete with the exact same like Indian population that you're competing with right now in India, and you'd also be surrounded with the exact same Indian population that you are surrounded with right now in India, because everybody wants to go to these countries because of course it is easier to go to. Of course you don't need to do any extra things, and it is nice to have. But when you learn German, like you have essentially access to 3 completely different countries, and you're also able to just like go to a place where this effort that you put inside is going to be valued a lot more higher because you put efforts inside in learning a language and getting fluent in that. That's the most important thing. So that's the next thing. And so for all of these things, you need to like really retrain your mind, and you need to like really understand like what is going on, what is missing. So first thing you need is like a clear motivation. Like, why do you want to learn German? Right? Is it because you want to find a job? Is it because you want to find friends easily when you're in Germany? Is it because you want to get comfortable in your life there? Because to be honest, like you will never get comfortable anywhere if you don't speak the local language. Think about in India. Like even if I would go from the north to the south, I don't speak Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada, any of these languages. And even in like Mumbai, like it just got really annoying to me, like when I was like hearing like Marathi all the time, and I'm not able to understand Marathi. So it is the same story like anywhere, any place you go to. I'm in Thailand right now. Everybody around us speaks Thai. I don't understand anything. And like, what kind of like story is happening? So you just like stop feeling comfortable in that place where you are not able to understand the language. That's why it's very important that if you're thinking about coming to Germany, like it's just such a massive positive, because you get jobs more easily, you find friends more easily, everything is a lot more familiar to you, everything is a lot more simpler to you, you feel at home much, much sooner because you're able to speak to anybody. So there's so many pluses to this, right? Then you come up with, when you have a clear motivation why you want to do that. Is it because of your job, for your studies, whatever? Then afterwards, what you need to figure out is a structure. For me, structure was like, of course, like I started taking some classes, And then afterwards, I started organizing things on the basis of the literature and stuff, by classes and so on. Because for Russian, you still don't have really solid language books which take you to A1, A2, B1, B2, and so on. You just have one book which is given for free, I think, by American universities, which is called Golosa. So that was for A1 and A2 level, and then you have a book 2 which is for A2 to B1 level, but it's still not really covering the B1 level. So I have something like A1 to A2 books, right? But for German, you have like very solid books for A1, A2, B1, B2, C1. So at C1, like essentially everything stops because yeah, like nobody can essentially teach you C2. Like C2 is something that you have to learn on your own, right? Like you have to just practice more, understand more vocabulary and so on, practice and listen to more things. So give yourself a structure. Once you have the structure clear, and that's very important. Like if you're trying it for the first time, if it's the first language you're learning, you are going to have a lot more back and forth. You'll be wasting a lot more time in creating a structure for yourself. I'm telling you from experience. I was also just like doing all sorts of nonsense stuff in the starting before I realized what kind of things are absolutely necessary for a level, so that I just learn them and I go to the next one. So when I figured that out, things became a lot more easier. Then afterwards comes clear guidelines. It's very important to have clear guidelines and clear structure for yourself, so that first of all, every single time you take an effort to do something, you don't fail in that. Like if you keep on failing in that very, very frequently, what happens is every single time you fail, your motivation dies down a little bit. Like it happens to most of the people. So what you need to do is like you need to give yourself some kind of task or some kind of text or something which are not way too above your level. When you're doing that, and okay, like you're missing a few questions or something, you don't understand some text, great, not a problem, you just use Google Translate. But like at least it's not like more than 50% of the things that you're getting wrong. When you start getting more than 50% of the things going wrong, then I think it's time to reevaluate things, because it's going to kill your motivation soon. So because motivation is also always limited. Once you run out of that motivation, it might take you a few months of break for you to come back and start getting in that thing again. And that's very important. So you have to like really figure this thing out. And to be honest, like if you think about all of these things, the best time to start doing anything is right now, because you can keep on saying I'll start the next week. I mean, right now it's pretty nice because the new year has just started. Everybody's having their New Year's resolutions. So if I just like give you a little bit of a goalpost which you can aim towards, is that think about this, like within just 2 weeks of you starting to learn German, I promise you that you're going to see a very solid progress. For 2 weeks, you just give me every single day 4 hours. That's it. I just need 4 hours per day, and you don't need to go crazy on the weekends or something, but just like 2 solid weeks, 4 hours per day. And I'm telling you that after 2 weeks, the progress in the language that you will have is going to be day and night difference than what you have right now. Because right now, maybe you don't understand anything at all. Maybe you understand a little bit, but you don't understand the grammar. All of these things, like we already cover in the Faster German courses. And from this, I mean that in the next 2 weeks, you would be at least, even if you're like just giving 4 hours per day, you'd be able to go through the module 1 at least, and some parts of module 2. And anyways, the course just has like a very little like module 4, and everything is already covered till module 3, right? So if you already have that, another 2 weeks of 4 hours per day, you'd be able to cover the entire course. If you're putting 8 hours per day, of course, things become much faster, and that's how you're able to go through the course in just 2 weeks itself. Then afterwards, when the exams come, you can take a look at the Goethe exam preparation, because we also have a dedicated module for that. We have the model test papers, and then on top of that, we made extra exercises. So we made Huron exercises, and then we made Lesen exercises. So all of these things are like right there for you, like which you are not going to find anywhere else. Because of course you go to Udemy and stuff, you can find some course for 999 rupees, 119 rupees, but these are like some basic like tourist German or something that they are teaching you. But this is not something that is going to be beneficial for you if you're covering levels. If you're covering levels, you need a proper structure, which is exactly provided in this course and this course only. You're not going to find it anywhere else online. So I think that's super beneficial. So give some time with this, because if somebody told me at that time when I was learning German that there are like so many problems happening with the story of like learning German, about the social programming around it, about like just kind of most of the ideas that people have about German coming from social media, things like that, I would have just like taken this a lot more differently, a lot more seriously, and I would be able to learn German much faster than I did, right? All of these things I'm telling you from my own experience, and these are going to be super beneficial for you too.